You know that feeling when you're in a class where everything just clicks, where it all makes perfect sense? Well, that's not magic, and it's definitely not an accident. It's great design. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the invisible architecture behind every powerful learning experience, curriculum design. We're going to break down the 6 core principles that turn a simple list of topics into an unforgettable journey.
So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the absolute foundation, the what and the when of teaching. Then, we'll get into how the best courses weave all those ideas together. We'll talk about balance, and then, and this is the important part, we are going to zero in on the key comparisons you absolutely need to know for your exams before we wrap it all up with a quick recap. And our goal here is pretty simple. By the time we're done with this, you won't just know these concepts, you'll really get them. We're aiming for that deep, clear understanding that lets you walk into your exam feeling totally prepared and confident.
Seriously, take a second and think back to the best class you've ever taken. The one that felt so intuitive, where every lesson just flowed perfectly into the next. That wasn't just some happy accident. It was meticulous, thoughtful planning. The secret sauce is in these 6 core dimensions of curriculum design, and we're about to unpack every single one.
All right, first things first. Let's talk about the absolute bedrock of any curriculum. It all comes down to answering 2 simple but absolutely critical questions. What are we actually going to teach, and when are we going to teach it? This, my friends, is scope and sequence. You get this part right, and everything else has a solid foundation to build on.
Let's kick things off with scope. Think about it this way. Before you can plan a journey, you need to know your destination and, maybe more importantly, what you need to pack. Scope is basically the packing list for your course. Every single topic, every skill, and every big idea that has to make it into the suitcase.
So, to get a little more formal, scope is the full recipe for your course. It includes the breadth, so all the different topics you'll touch on, and the depth, which is how far you'll go with each one. And here's the key part a lot of people miss. It's not just about facts and figures. It also includes affective learning. That's the stuff like attitudes, values, and even feelings you want students to develop. So, how do you decide what actually makes the cut? Well, you have to ask some tough questions. Like, if you're designing a high school biology class, you can't just have lectures. You've got to balance the theory with hands-on labs and maybe even some debates on ethics. But the biggest question of all is always, can we realistically get through all of this in the time we have? That right there is the constant challenge of getting the scope just right.
Okay, so once you've figured out your what, it's time to figure out your when, right? It's not enough to just have all the right ingredients. You have to add them in the right order to make the recipe work. And that brings us to our second pillar, sequence.
You can think of sequence as the fine art of arrangement. It's all about ordering the content so that every lesson builds logically on the one that came before it. The real goal here is what we call cumulative and continuous learning, which is a fancy way of saying that understanding deepens over time, instead of being something you just cram, forget, and move on from.
Now, there are 4 main ways to do this. First, simple to complex. Pretty straightforward, right? You learn to add before you tackle algebra. Second, prerequisite learning. This is where you absolutely must learn one skill to do the next, like learning the alphabet before you can read. Third, hold apart, where you start with the big picture, like a world map, before zooming in on a single country. And finally, chronological learning, the obvious choice for telling a story, like in a history class.
So we have our content and we have our order. But how do we weave it all together so it doesn't feel like a random collection of facts? Well, the next 3 dimensions are all about creating those vital connections. We're going to dive into continuity, integration, and articulation.
This quote from Ralph Tyler just nails the idea of continuity. It's all about the vertical repetition of key skills. Think about learning to write a good essay. You don't just do it once in 5th grade and then you're done. No way. You revisit that skill year after year, practicing it over and over, with the expectations getting a little higher each time. That is continuity in action.
Now, integration is a little different. It's all about building horizontal bridges between subjects. It's the antidote to that feeling that every class exists in its own little bubble. A perfect example would be a history project on ancient Rome that doesn't just look at dates and battles, but also pulls in the art, the literature, and even the science from that period. It helps students see knowledge as one big, unified web.
And finally, we have articulation. This is kind of the master connector that brings everything together. It's about making sure there's a smooth, logical flow, both vertically, from one grade to the next, and horizontally across different subjects in the same grade. Simply put, good articulation is why Algebra 1 actually prepares you for Algebra 2 and why what you learn in history class might just help you in English class.
So we've built the foundation and we've connected all the pieces, but there's one last crucial dimension that really acts as the glue holding the entire structure together. Let's talk about the fine art of balance.
Balance is really all about fairness and proportion. It's constantly asking, are we giving the right amount of time and weight to each part of the curriculum? A balanced curriculum makes sure that no one subject or skill dominates everything else, ensuring students get a truly well-rounded education that helps them grow intellectually, personally, and even socially. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. We are now officially entering the must-know for the exam section. These next couple of slides are laser-focused on those tricky distinctions that often trip people up on tests, and they're designed for maximum recall. Pay close attention here. This table right here is your secret weapon for any exam questions on sequencing. Now listen up, because here's the trap they love to set. Do not confuse prerequisite with simple to complex. Prerequisite means you literally cannot do B without first mastering A. Simple to complex is just about ordering things by difficulty. Burn these core ideas and their examples into your brain. They are your best defense against those tricky multiple choice questions.
And here is another absolutely critical distinction for your exam. Vertical articulation moves up the ladder, connecting one grade level to the next. Think Algebra 1 leading to Algebra 2. Horizontal articulation moves across the hallway, connecting different subjects within the same grade. Think about an 8th grade history class and an 8th grade English class working together on a project. Vertical is up, horizontal is across. Got it?
Whew, we have covered a ton of ground. So before we wrap this up, let's do a super quick, rapid-fire summary to really lock these concepts in for your revision.
Okay, let's lock this in lightning round style. Scope is what? Sequence is when. Continuity is repeating. Integration is linking. Articulation is connecting. And balance is all about weight. Seriously, grab your phone and take a screenshot of this slide. This is your ultimate cheat sheet for last-minute revision. So, I'll leave you with this one final thought. Looking back, which one of these dimensions has had the biggest impact on your own learning journey? Was it a perfectly sequenced math class where everything finally made sense? Or maybe an integrated project that connected history and art for you in a totally new way? Give it some thought. It's the best way to make these ideas really stick. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.